All stand. This coroner's court is now sitting.
Good morning. Today we'll be commencing the Greenwater Creek fire inquiry. I'll just take appearances.
Please, Your Honour, my name's Castleton. I appear with my learned friend, Mr Harker, assisting Your Honour in relation to that matter.
Thank you, Mr Castleton.
Your Honour, my name is Newton. I appear on behalf of the Commissioner for the Rural Fire Service, the Commissioner, for National Parks and Wildlife Service, Forestry Corporation of New South Wales.
Thank you, Mr Newton. Mr Castleton.
May it please the Court. Your Honour, this is the inquiry into the cause and origin of the Greenwater Creek, Lake Burgarang fire, which originated in remote bushland in Burgarang Valley in late November 2019. I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a Google Earth map prepared by those instructing. And Your Honour will see that the suspected area of origin within the valley is shown by the red marker on this satellite image. It is in the southernmost part of the Blue Mountains National Park, southwest of Sydney. To the west lies the Canangra Boyd National Park. To the east, Lake Burgarang, Sydney's primary water supply, and the Burgarang State Conservation Area to the south, Erandery State Conservation Area, and further southeast, the Natai National Park and the Bargo State Conservation Area. Over a period of almost 11 weeks, the Greenwater Creek fire burnt approximately 278,200 hectares. The sheer extent of the fire, Your Honour, is shown by this progression map from February of 2020. The fire spread as far as, if we just have that brought back up, please. Thank you. The fire spread as far as Jenolan Caves in the northwest, Taralga in the southwest, Mittagong in the southeast, and Warragamba in the northeast. You want to see to the southeast towards Braemar, Your Honour, we'll see Bargo. Your Honour will hear some evidence throughout this inquiry and also in relation to two inquests which Your Honour's hearing on Wednesday and Thursday, Bargo, Balmoral and Buxton, just to help orient Your Honour in relation to those matters. The fire burnt in the Goulburn, Mullery, Oberon, Upper Lachlan, Wingecarribee and Wallandilly local government areas encompassed within the lands of the Gunundurra, Wiradjuri and Dharawal people. The majority of the fire impact was in the Southern Highlands, Your Honour. The loss caused by the fire was catastrophic on a number of levels. While on duty, two RFS firefighters, Geoffrey Keaton, Deputy Captain of the Horsley Park Rural Fire Brigade, and Andrew O'Dwyer of the Horsley Park Rural Fire Brigade, tragically died after the truck they were travelling in was struck by a tree in Buxton. Your Honour will conduct an inquest into the deaths of Mr Keaton and Mr O'Dwyer on Wednesday and Thursday this week. We acknowledge today the presence of Melissa O'Dwyer, Andrew's wife, who's in court today.
I'd like to welcome Melissa here today. And also I'd like to acknowledge and welcome any family and friends of Andrew and Geoffrey who may be watching today. I'm sorry it's under such sad circumstances that you're here.
Your Honour, 37 homes were destroyed with over 100 properties suffering significant damage. 240,000 hectares of native vegetation was burnt in national parks, including the Blue Mountains National Park, Canangra Boyd National Park and Natai National Park. The Rocklily Wombats, a wildlife sanctuary set in the southern western corner of the Blue Mountains National Park, suffered significant damage. Approximately 38.9 hectares of the 40.5 hectare sanctuary was impacted. The loss of native species, including wombats, koalas, endangered brush-tailed rock wallabies, eastern grey kangaroos and greater gliders is immeasurable. The progression and behaviour of the fire was at times extreme. Firefighting efforts were reportedly often hampered by consecutive days of high temperatures, low humidity and strong northwesterly winds, ending with gusty southerly changes. The court will now see a video from the ABC that aired on 6 December 2019 and which provides a snapshot of the sheer ferocity of the fire. What Your Honour just saw there is a video which shows Crown Fire and crews retreating as a wall of flames engulfs bushland near Orangeville. The focus of today's inquiry is on the cause and origin of the Greenwater Creek fire. Once the court has completed its consideration of the cause and origin of this and other fires across the state of New South Wales over the 2019-2020 bushfire season, the court will review the evidence and issues raised in each matter and determine which issues will proceed to further and more detailed consideration via a representative case study. The hearing into representative case studies will occur at the Coroners Court here at Lidcombe, commencing on the 5th of September later this year. Your Honour, I now come to the fire and how it started. On Wednesday morning, 27 November 2019, smoke was reportedly sighted in the Blue Mountains National Park from lookouts in Katoomba and surrounding suburbs. In response, several officers from the National Parks and Wildlife Service were tasked with undertaking a reconnaissance flight on the helicopter Park Air 3 to obtain intelligence on the locations of fires, their status, and to provide a holistic view of the landscape to assist with devising plans of attack. During that flight, 3 fires were detected: the Greenwater Creek fire, the Red Ridge fire, which was burning in the central Blue Mountains, and a smaller fire, being the Butchers Creek fire, which was reported to be only 2 or 3 smoking trees and largely self-extinguished. National Parks and Wildlife Service officer Tobias Setri took the first photographs of the Greenwater Creek fire at around 3 minutes past 9 in the morning. And I'll just have those photographs displayed now for Your Honour's benefit. As Your Honour can see from the first photograph, the fire is in a remote location. The terrain is heavily vegetated and mountainous. The further photos show the fire in its infancy. Smoke is bellowing from amongst the trees, but no flames are visible. After the helicopter returned to base, it was tasked with assisting the RFS in waterbombing the Red Ridge fire. It was not until 2 p.m. that the helicopter was retasked to winch National Parks and RFS crews into Butchers Creek and Greenwater Creek firegrounds. By the time officers returned to the fireground at 2:45 p.m, the Greenwater Creek fire had increased to about 32 hectares. Flame heights were reaching 3 to 5 metres, and the fire was accelerating swiftly uphill and over a cliff line. It was deemed too dangerous for crews to winch into the fireground. Officers were instead winched into the Butchers Creek fireground. Nicholas Nelson, a field supervisor with the National Parks and Wildlife Service, describes the conditions on the day. After some time fighting the fire on the ground with the assistance of 2 or 3 waterbombing runs, there was a sudden flare-up and the fire jumped containment lines. Members of the National Parks and Wildlife Service and Rural Fire Service attempted to implement a hand tool line, but the fire spread too fast. Mr. Nilsson moved to higher ground and saw that his team was almost entirely surrounded by the fire. As the team were extracted by helicopter, the fire began to form at their feet. A number of the team's bags began to catch fire. Chief Superintendent Davis from the RFS states that significant retardant resources were directed at the eastern edge of the Greenwater Creek fire to restrict its progression towards Lake Burgarang. The fire, however, pushed south overnight. Turning, if I may, Your Honour, now to the progression of the fire. The following day, that is Thursday, 28 November 2019, the Greenwater Creek fire spread approximately 3.7 kilometres to the southwest. Your Honour can see from this progression map the significant spread of the fire on that day relative to the Butchers Creek fire, which is the smaller fire to the left, or the west of the Greenwater Creek fire. RFS aerial footage taken at around 11:39am on the 28th of November 2019 captures the vastness of the fire burning west of the Warragamba Dam and Lake Burgarang in the Blue Mountains in Canangra National Park. I'll just have shown now. This is a video posted to the New South Wales RFS Facebook page. Following day, Your Honour, that is Friday, 29 November 2019, the fire had grown to 2,700 hectares and was mapped as spreading distances of up to 2.7 kilometres to the west and northwest. During this spread, shown on the fire progression map currently before Your Honour, which is found at page 1101 of the brief, the fire joined with the Butchers Creek fire. Rowan Lund, New South Wales RFS Air Attack Supervisor, took several aerial photographs of the Greenwater Creek fire around 2:30pm on that day. The power and size of the fire is evident in each photo, particularly when compared to the first photographs which Your Honour was taken to shortly ago. Numerous other fires joined with the Greenwater Creek fire over a 16-day period between 22 November and 7 December 2019. And I've just had displayed now, for Your Honour's benefit, fire progression map for 29 November 2019, which is found at page 1097 of the brief of evidence. To the south-southwest was the Colong Stock Route Irandari fire. Your Honour, that fire was identified as going at about 4pm on 22 November 2019. It was amalgamated into the Peaks fire on 2 December 2019. Your Honour will see a pinpoint location for the Peaks fire. That fire was identified as going on 28 November 2019. It joined with the Greenwater Creek fire on 3 December 2019. To the west was the Cowmung River fire near Oberon, which was identified as going on 27 November 2019. It joined with the Greenwater Creek fire on 8 December 2019. And finally, a short distance to the east of that fire, Your Honour will see the identification of the Thurrat fire, Oberon. It was identified as going on 27 November 2019 and joined with the Greenwater Creek fire on 1 December 2019. To the north of these fires was the Ruined Castle fire, Kadumba Valley. It is shown on the map as the Mount Solitary fire. While the Ruined Castle fire burned in very close proximity to the Greenwater Creek fire, they did not join. Nonetheless, the existence of two fires of such significance in close proximity stretched the resources available to fight both fires from the outset. The inquiry into the cause and origin of the Ruined Castle fire, Your Honour, will be heard tomorrow. I come now, Your Honour, to have displayed a fire regression map of 1 December 2019, which is located at page 1104 of the brief of evidence. On Sunday, 1 December 2019, the fire was mapped as spreading extreme and abnormal distances of up to 7.7 kilometres to the east and 3.7 kilometres to the west. Over the following days, the fire bore down quickly on the Peaks and Colong stock route fires and spread further to the east. The following day, Monday, 2 December 2019, the size of the fire was reportedly 54,600 hectares. That day, the fire had spread approximately 7.4 kilometres to the northeast. Your Honour, it is uncommon for a fire to spread more than 7 kilometres in 2 consecutive days. Unfortunately, as Your Honour is aware from other fire inquiries, it was an all too common occurrence in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. The fire continued its spread over the following days. By 4 December 2019, the fire had reached the western edge of Lake Burgarang. Chief Superintendent Davis states that at 4:57 p.m, the fire spotted to the eastern side of Lake Burgarang in an area inaccessible to vehicles. The spot fire was attacked by crews from boats on Lake Burgarang and water bucketing aircraft. Westerly winds hindered attempts to fight that spot fire from the ground, and on Thursday, 5 December 2019, those winds drove the fire 13.2 kilometres to the east. As can be seen from this progression map of the 5th of December, Your Honour sees the rapid spread to the east threaten the communities of Natai, Oakdale, Warumbi and Orangeville. That threat was realised the following day. The fire ravaged parts of the communities of Natai, Oakdale, Warumbi and Orangeville. Your Honour, I'll just have played now a video from the ABC that aired on the 6th of December 2019. What Your Honour just saw there was the fire engulfing bushland near the communities of Natai, Oakdale, Warumbi and Orangeville. On the 6th of December, Your Honour, 11 civilians were extracted by New South Wales RFS search and rescue helicopters and at least 13 structures were destroyed or damaged on that day. By 8 December 2019, the fire had joined with the Cowmung fire and was reportedly 100,000 hectares in size. I'll just have displayed, Your Honour, now the fire progression map for 13 December 2019, which is found at page 1138 of the brief of evidence. The between Tuesday 10 and Friday 13 December 2019, the easternmost part of the fire commenced a narrow run that Your Honour can see just west of Picton. The run proceeded past Picton and entered just to the north of Pheasant's Nest. South-southwest of that run, Your Honour will see a small linear area of fire almost due west of Hilltop. That fire started on 13 December and grew over the coming days. In the middle of both fires were the communities of Bargo, Balmoral and Buxton. Your Honour, Buxton is not shown, but it sits just to the northwest of Bargo, and I'm not sure whether we can magnify that map just to assist you on it to locate those townships and villages. Your Honour will see to the south east Bargo and Balmoral, where the cursor was circling a moment ago. Thank you. I'll have displayed now, Your Honour, aerial footage taken of the fire, which was posted on New South Wales RFS Facebook on the 10th of December 2019 at about 18 minutes past 6 in the evening on that day. Get some appreciation of the scale of the fire from that aerial footage of the 10th of December 2019. On Saturday, 14 December 2019, backburning was undertaken by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service in the Natai National Park west of Buxton. It was intended to carry out backburn to line up with an area of low fuel that had been the subject of hazard reduction in April of 2019. The Incident Action Plan map for 14 December, which Honour sees on the screen now, provides a plan of the proposed backburn. Your Honour will see a grid reference 71 across and grid reference 7 up, a series of squares with lines protruding towards the west. That marks the proposed backburn. If Your Honour follows the path of the backburn down the image, Your Honour will see it meeting a bold black hashed area. That is the area of the previous hazard reduction burn to which I referred a moment ago. Between the hashed area and the proposed backburn is the Little River. The backburn ultimately extended further to the south than had been planned into an area with higher fuel loads. Just after midday on 14 December 2019, the burn started progressing towards Balmoral. By 12:45 p.m, the backburn had crossed the southern containment line and air support was called in. The fire took hold and over the coming days continued to spread towards Balmoral. And I'll just have displayed Your Honour now aerial footage taken at around 4:38 p.m. on the 14th of December 2019, which was posted on the New South Wales RFS Facebook page that same day. Your Honour, the spread of the fire came to a tragic climax on Thursday, 19 December 2019. In the afternoon of 19 December 2019, the fire made a run to the east, impacting Balmoral and then Bargo, including the Bargo Dingo Sanctuary. The court will now see some aerial photographs and footage taken of the fire at 12:17 p.m, showing the fire having crossed the railway line near Balmoral. A southerly change then pushed the northern flank of the fire into Buxton. From this day on, 19 December 2019, and following, 47 homes and other structures were destroyed in Balmoral, Bargo and Buxton. And I'll just have played now footage that aired on the ABC News on 19 December 2019, which shows, Your Honour, the sheer ferocity of the fire faced by the residents of Balmoral, Bargo and Buxton on that day. Your Honour, the documentary, A Fire Inside, which aired on Channel 9, provides an insight into the experience of those in Balmoral. Brendan O'Connor, former captain of the Balmoral Village Rural Fire Brigade, states that every member of his brigade made the decision to stay, notwithstanding the unsafe conditions on that day. They defended the village against the fire, saving lives, including 35 people who had taken shelter at the fire station as a last resort. I'll just have shown now, Your Honour, an extract from that documentary, A Fire Inside. It's found at tab 28.
You're in absolute firestorm. It was day, but it was night. We fought our way back here because the other call came through that 35 people were now in the station, and the station was actually being impacted now.
When we got in the fire shed, everything was all hazy. It was chaos. It really was. The fire engine was already under amber attack at that stage.
Outside, it was roaring.
Yeah, it was. You could hear the embers hitting the shed.
Our fire station is the place of last resort. They believed they were all going to die in here that night, potentially. We were running out of water. Firefighters had staged and tried to defend. Just through sheer exhaustion, they'd collapsed where they were. We were absolutely spent.
Your Honour, heard there from Brendan O'Connor, former captain of the Balmoral Village Rural Fire Brigade, and local Balmoral residents Justin and Helena Can. Your Honour, tragically it was during the response to this part of the fire that Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer lost their lives. Your Honour will see a fire progression map for 19 December 2019. The grey marker on the map to the west of Bargo marks the location of that horrific event. On Saturday, 21 December 2019, the fire was approximately 190,000 hectares in size. Further properties were lost in the Balmoral area under severe weather conditions. Fortunately, Your Honour, a southerly change pushed the fire away from Yandera at a time when the fire was within metres of impacting properties. I'll have now displayed, Your Honour, a fire progression map for 4 January 2020, which is found at page 1189 of the brief of evidence. Between Sunday, 22 December 2019, and Friday, 4 January 2020, the fire spread on all fronts. The northwest flank of the fire extended into the Jenolan and the Jenolan State Forest. To the northeastern flank had spread further past the Warragamba Gorge. In the south, it had spread as far as the Wombian Caves and just past High Range. Most notably, there were 2 days during this period of extreme abnormal fire spread. 11 kilometres on 31 December 2019, Your Honour, and some 9 kilometres on 4 January 2020. 3 homes in Jenolan and the Jenolan RFS shed were destroyed on 4 January 2020. Fortunately, several properties were saved by Fire and Rescue New South Wales using compressed air foam systems. Weeks of prolonged efforts of firefighting crews were able to defend a heritage-listed Jenolan Caves house, a 122-year-old heritage-listed building and an icon of the Blue Mountains accommodation. Its loss would have exacerbated the damage caused to so many communities with the loss of tourism because of the fires. It is a critical part of many residents' livelihoods. The effects were not short-term, with clean-up efforts extending the impact long after the fires had passed and been extinguished. After 5 January 2020, the spread of the fire was generally limited. On Monday, 10 February 2020, the Greenwater Creek fire was recorded as out. It had burnt, as I said earlier, 278,200 hectares. I come now, Your Honour, to the investigation into the cause and origin of the Greenwater Creek fire. The scope of issues to be considered today is limited to the cause and area of origin of the Greenwater Creek fire. The court will hear evidence from 3 witnesses only. Detective Inspector Daniel Clements, the officer in charge of the investigation attached to the Hawkesbury Police Area Command. Detective Senior Constable Thomas Dodd, attached to the Camden Police Area Command, who reviewed lightning strike data in connection with this fire. And finally, Andrew Sweeney, New South Wales Rural Fire Service fire investigator, who undertook an aerial investigation of the suspected area of origin of the fire on 21 January 2020. Your Honour will hear from Mr Sweeney that in the area of the suspected point of origin, he saw 2 trees that had been affected by lightning. Mr. Sweeney took photographs of each of those trees. I'll just have those photographs displayed for Your Honour's benefit now. Your Honour will see in this first photograph, the first tree can be seen in the centre of this image. And then the second photograph of the second tree, which is found at page 64-18, is circled in red. As Your Honour can see, the damage to the top of the tree is markedly different to the surrounding trees, with the surrounding canopy largely undisturbed. Your Honour will hear evidence from Mr. Sweeney of his observations of key fire indicators, including foliage freeze and the angle of char in the area around the trees, which suggested to him that they were the point of origin of the fire. Mr. Sweeney also reports having identified a third tree within the suspected area of origin of the Butchers Creek fire. While flying around the surrounding area, Mr. Sweeney states that he saw numerous trees that had been struck by lightning inside the burnt areas. However, he expresses the opinion that from the damage differential that they were not the origin of the fire. Mr. Sweeney has not identified any other potential cause of the fire, and in his expert opinion, it was caused by a lightning strike to the two trees he's identified and which I've just had displayed to Your Honour just now. I come now to the lightning strike. Your Honour will see on screen a map which is found at page 59 of the brief of evidence. Your Honour, that map is a map of lightning strikes recorded on the New South Wales RFS system common operating picture, including data from Weather Zone and Metro Weather, previously known as GPATs, for the 48 hours, so 2 days prior to 7:19 a.m. on 26 November 2019. As Your Honour can see, there was an enormous number of lightning strikes across the entire area in and around the Greenwater Creek area. The data has been overlaid on the fire progression map for 28 November 2019 in an image which is found at page 76 of the brief of evidence. In creating this image or map, the RFS Predictive Services Unit included all lightning strikes recorded from Weather Zone and Metro Weather between 11 a.m. on 25 November 2019 and 11 a.m. on 26 November 2019, the day before the fire was first sighted. The map shows 18 lightning strikes within the mapped areas of the Greenwater Creek fire and the Butchers Creek fire between 12:08 a.m. and 1:22 a.m. on 26 November 2019. Detective Senior Constable Thomas Dodd with the Narellan Police has overlaid some of these strikes with the early line scans of the fire. The first line scan of the fire was taken at 12:18 p.m. on 27 November 2019, which Your Honour will see on screen now. That line scan shows 3 distinct hotspots. The 2 to the east are in the suspected area of origin of the Greenwater Creek fire. The hotspot to the west is the suspected point of origin of the Butchers Creek fire. As Your Honour can see from the image, Detective Senior Constable Dodd identified 3 lightning strikes as having occurred in the area of these hotspots in the early morning of 26 November 2019. It is anticipated that the evidence that Your Honour will hear today will be to the effect that the Greenwater Creek fire was caused by lightning strike. Before I tender the brief, Your Honour, could I seek an order that the evidence received in this fire inquiry be also received into evidence into the inquest into the deaths of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer, and vice versa? I understand that order has been circulated to Mr. Newton's instructors.
I have no
Thank
objection to that, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. I make that order now.
Could I formally tender, Your Honour, the Greenwater Creek Lake Burragarang fire, which I understand will be Exhibit 52A
Yes, that will be Exhibit 52A.
And if it's convenient, Your Honour, I propose now to call Detective Inspector Daniel Clements, the officer in charge of the investigation.
Yes, thank you.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you, Detective. And you may remove your mask.
Thank you.
Detective Inspector, would you please state your name, rank and the station you're presently attached to?
Daniel Clements, Detective Inspector, Hawkesbury Police Area Command.
And Detective Inspector, were you tasked to be the officer in charge of the Greenwater Creek bushfire investigation?
Yes.
And doing the best you can, when did you first become aware that you were to be the officer in charge of that fire investigation?
On the 20th of December 2019.
And Detective Inspector, do you have with you this morning a copy of the statement that you provided in relation to your investigation?
Yes.
Please feel free to refer to it throughout. Can I just ask you this? Was a strike force formed in relation to the Greenwater Creek fire?
Yes.
And what was the name of that strike force?
Strike Force Colong.
And what was the purpose of the formation of that strike force?
To adequately prepare a brief of evidence for this inquiry.
And in relation to your investigation into the Greenwater Creek fire, how many other New South Wales police officers did you rely upon to assist you in that task?
There were numerous, in excess of 15, throughout the Camden Police Area Command and other neighbouring commands as well.
Thank you. Now, were you present in court this morning when I opened this fire inquiry?
Yes.
I might just have shown, if that's okay, that the first Google Earth map that was displayed at the commencement of my opening remarks. In terms of the scale of this fire, that is its reach, would you agree with me that it went as far west as the Jenolan Caves?
Yes.
North, east towards Warragamba Dam?
Yes.
To the south to Wombian Caves?
Yes.
And then the southeast down towards Mittagong?
Yes, that's correct.
And as part of your investigation, Detective Inspector, did you come to learn that the total area which was burnt by this fire was in the order of 278,200 hectares?
Yes.
In that regard, do I note that there's a minor correction in respect of your statement where you incorrectly state 1,278,000 hectares in paragraph 4117 and paragraph 121? Do I take it that should be read as 278,000?
That's correct.
And similarly, are there some other minor corrections to be made in relation to some names, and in particular, there's an incorrect naming of Jason Penning, where I think you've recorded it as Jason Denning.
Correct.
And Your Honour, for Your Honour's benefit, those corrections need to be made paragraph 73, 77 and 78 of Detective Inspector Clement's statement. Now, in terms of property damage, Detective Inspector, did you come to learn, based on your inquiries and investigations, that perhaps 32 houses were completely destroyed by this fire, and in excess of 100 properties that were damaged or destroyed?
Correct.
And I'll come to the tragic circumstances relating to Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer shortly, but there were 2 fatalities. In terms of injuries, were there, from your investigations, many firefighters or residents injured as a result of this fire?
numerous firefighters were injured as a result, and a number of residents were treated in relation to the fighting of the fire.
I'll just step now through your statement. A Section 44 declaration was made, was it not, at about 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 28th of November 2019?
Yes.
And when was that rescinded to your knowledge? Was it early February 2020?
Yes.
And in terms of the local government areas that Section 44 declaration covered, did that include the Wallandilly, Wingecarribee, part of Oberon, part of Upper Lachlan and part of Goulburn Mulwaree,
Yes.
local government areas?
That's correct.
And in terms of, again, the size, is the area of the Wallandilly and the Wingecarribee local government areas perhaps the order of 525,000 hectares?
Yes.
And that is an area that's commonly referred to as the Southern Highlands.
Correct.
And was that the area that was mostly impacted from your investigations by reason of this fire?
Yes, and slightly to the north of the Southern Highlands, into the Bargo area, and then prior to that was the Natai, Oakdale, Orangeville and Warrombe areas.
What I might do is now just come to the progressions. You found that the fire may have commenced around the 26th of November 2019.
Yes.
And I'll come to the cause of that ignition shortly. From that point in time, did it generally move to the east?
Yes.
Towards Lake Burgarang?
Yes.
And did it, from your investigations, spot over Lake Burgarang around the 3rd or the 4th of December 2019?
Yes.
Was there a significant run at about that time?
Yes, there was.
And was that about the 4th of December 2019?
Yes.
And were the conditions on that day particularly severe weather conditions for fighting fire?
Yes.
And what's your recollection of what took place on or about the 4th of December 2019 that enabled that fire to run?
So from the Burgarang Valley, there's a steep incline up into the Natai area, and Natai, that's where the fire took control and burnt rapidly up the hill, so to speak, or up the mountain, and that was the significant cause of concern that the fire was going to jump Lake Burgarang to hit that valley and find its peak up the hill or up the mountain towards the Natai, which borders onto Oakdale, Warrombe and
Orangeville. And from your investigations, was an evacuation centre set up in that area around Natai, Oakdale, Orangeville?
Yeah, the evacuation centre was set up at Picton Bowling Club initially. And then there were some other evacuation centres for animals at the Camden showgrounds.
And from the 4th of December, did it start to pick up again? It progressed, as you've identified in your statement, mostly to the east. Obviously, there were some runs to the northeast and also to the west and to the south. But after the 4th of November, was there another time period where the fire behaved in an abnormal way?
Yes.
And when was that, Detective Inspector?
That was around the 4th of December during the afternoon.
4th or the 6th?
Oh, sorry, the 6th.
And by that stage, was the fire in the order of 35,000 hectares in size?
Yes.
And was burning out of control?
Yes.
And on the 6th, just to help you orientate yourself in terms of timelines, do you recall 2 gentlemen being airlifted?
Yes.
So what happened on the 6th of December, to your recollection? And if you need to refer to your statement, please do, Detective Inspector.
So 2 males were staying in a remote property near Urandry and could not leave owing to road closures, and they were airlifted to the Oaks airfield by Rural Fire Service. Camden Police conveyed these males to Camden, where they were united with relatives. Firefighters were performing hazard reduction backburning within the Burragreen Valley in relation to the fire. The wind changed direction suddenly, causing the flames to turn back onto the firefighters, catching them off guard somewhat. The following injuries were sustained to those firefighters. Mark Sheehan suffered superficial burns to the neck and a flash to the eyes. David Morse suffered superficial burns to the neck, and Philip Warner suffered minor burns. All three firefighters were treated at hospital.
And also on that same day, the 6th of December 2019, was there significant spotting which took hold of residential properties along Ridge Road in Oakdale?
Yes.
And at that time, to your recollection, was an emergency warning notified for the residents in and around that area of
Yes.
Oakdale?
Yes.
Now, were, again, from your inquiries and investigations, Detective Inspector, on this occasion, 6 December, were 11 people airlifted by the RFS?
Yes.
From their premises?
Yes.
And were they, at that time, was the Narellan Community Centre set up as an evacuation centre for people around Oakdale?
Yes.
Now, in terms of your involvement on the ground, at this point in time, you haven't been tasked to be the officer in charge of the investigation, but you were working at that stage, were you not, at Camden?
Yes, I was.
What were you doing throughout this period of time when the fire had commenced in late November up to early to mid-December?
I was a detective sergeant at Camden Police Area Command, and during that period, I was allocating staff to assist with certain road closures when required, not actively being an officer in charge at that point, but just monitoring the progress of the fire. And it wasn't until the 20th of December that I was officially became the officer in charge.
I just want to move now, if I may, to the Backburn, which you've referred to in your statement, which took place on or about the 14 December 2019. And if you need to refer to your statement, please do. But from your inquiries, Detective Inspector, was there a backburn operation that was conducted around the Buxton and Balmoral Townships that had an impact on those communities?
Yes.
And what's your understanding of what took place in relation to that?
I'll just bear with me. I'll just find it in my statement.
If it assists, you deal with it at paragraph 108 on page 34 of your statement, and also if it assists at paragraph 122 on page 38.
So an investigation was conducted by New South Wales Rural Fire Service in relation to that backburning operation. The investigation concluded that the backburn was inadvertently extended beyond its planned southern termination point by the divisional commander due to a lack of clarity on containment lines and backburn alignment and status within the incident action plan operational mapping. Witnesses described a progressive approach to detailed planning on the Greenwater Creek fire. Under this approach, an agreed strategy for containment was developed in consultation with local group officers, brigades, and land management agencies incorporating conceptual containment lines. Divisional commanders and local brigades were tasked to progressively work along the conceptual containment line, undertaking reconnaissance of options, engaging with landholders, agreeing on detailed alignment, tasking plant to construct enhanced lines, and then backburning from containment lines once completed. As detailed alignment was determined, mapping was updated. Heavy plant operations progressed. The status of containment lines were changed from proposed to completed. Maps were updated to reflect backburn progress based on situation reports and live scans. The investigation found that in the days prior to the backburn in question, this process appears to have broken down. The detailed backburn alignment identified based on reconnaissance undertaken on the 11th of December was not mapped, leaving the conceptual backburn alignment from the overarching strategy within the operational mapping and incident action plan, with vague and non-specific tasking in which relied on that flawed mapping. Further, the detailed containment line alignment did not appear to have been constructed by the day of the backburn on the 14th of December 2019, despite a seeming understanding within the incident management team that it had been. The incident action plan and operational mapping indicated that the backburn was to cut straight across the Little River Gorge. The planning cell were of the understanding that the backburn was to go around to the northern arm of the Little River Fire Trail, and the divisional commander believed that the backburn was to go around the southern arm of the Little River Fire Trail. There seems to have been an assumption that containment lines had been completed. As there was no documented lines to provide a common reference point between the IMT and the divisional commander, there was no basis for clarification and error trapping.
Thank you, Detective Inspector. And as a result of that breach of the containment line, did the fire spread towards Balmoral and to Buxton, to your understanding?
Yes.
I come now to the 19th of December 2019. Do you have any recollections yourself of the conditions on the fire ground on that day as part of your duties as a police officer?
Yes, so I deployed to the Bargo area initially on that day. About lunchtime, I arrived around the Bargo area in the vicinity of the Dingo sanctuary.
And what was the purpose of you being deployed to that area around Bargo?
Purely for numbers to assist in traffic control, evacuation, coordination.
Were there a number of road closures in and around Bargo?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, Balmoral and Buxton?
Yes.
And how long did you remain in that general vicinity for?
I think I left there probably about 8 o'clock that night.
Did you travel Wilson's Drive, to your recollection?
Yes, I did.
Around Buxton?
Yes, I did. I travelled between Thirlmere and Buxton sometime after 5 p.m.
Now, it's mid to late December 2019. How would you describe the conditions as you yourself drove down Wilson Drive?
So, as I said, it was about 5 p.m. The conditions on that day, the weather report was in excess of 40 degrees. However, me being fair-skinned, I didn't get sunburned in any way because of the smoke cover. The smoke cover was intensely thick, and driving between Thirlmere and Buxton that particular day, the line of sight in front was, I had a high patrol vehicle in front of me that had the red lights and sirens, red lights flashing, and they were difficult to see, and the car was only a short distance in front of me. That's the intense thickness of the smoke during that period of time.
At this time, 5 o'clock or thereabouts on the 19th, you've described that highway patrol car a short distance in front of your vehicle. Doing the best you can, how many metres or so do you think it was in front of you?
Oh, it was probably about, we were driving slow, so it was probably only about 10 metres at the most in front of our vehicle, so my vehicle to that vehicle, maybe slightly more, but close enough that we could see each other. But the lights, as I said, was very difficult to see during the thickness of the smoke.
Would you describe it as poor visibility?
Very poor.
And was it an active fire ground? Was there active fire on either side of the road from your observations?
Yes, there was.
And did you make any observations in relation to damaged trees or not?
There was trees that were on fire. However, the smoke was that thick that I really couldn't see damage to the trees. There was clearly trees that were on fire that had been previously burnt or were burning at the time.
And did you come to learn that later that day, later that night on the 19th of December, that there'd been an accident involving a rural fire service truck and a collision with a tree.
Yes.
Did you attend the scene of that incident or not?
No, I didn't attend the scene of that incident on that particular day. I attended some 3 days later.
And what was the purpose of you attending the scene of the incident 3 days later?
That was when I was the officer in charge. So as part of my investigative duty, I attended that scene along with a number of others.
And as part of your duties as the officer in charge, what steps did you take to investigate the accident involving Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer?
That investigation was being managed by the crash investigation unit. So I liaised with the senior constable that was the officer in charge of the crash.
And is that leading senior constable Brian Wilson?
That's right.
From the New South Wales Crash Investigation Unit within New South Wales Police?
Yes.
Are you able to describe the general scene of where the incident occurred?
It was a two-way roadway, so I think north-south bound lanes, and in that particular area where the crash occurred, there was a culvert on one side of the road which had tree lines going up, and then I believe the railway line ran adjacent to the roadway as well.
Thank you, Detective Inspector. Now, in terms of the fire and its progression, did you come to learn that the fire was officially declared out on the 10th of February?
Yes.
2020?
Yes.
And in terms of your investigations, what conclusions did you reach based on your investigation as to the likely cause of this particular fire?
My investigation revealed the cause was in relation to lightning strikes in the Burragoring Valley that was displayed by yourself in your opening. Those lightning strikes matched up to areas where the fire was first identified. That particular area was dense bushland, kilometres away from any road or track particular area, and in that particular area there was no sign of any man-made object or anything other than natural bush.
Did you come to learn that it was so remote and so rugged that National Parks and Wildlife and RFS couldn't winch fire crews down, that's raft crews, to attend the fireground because it was just too rugged and too inaccessible?
Correct. And the same with the forensic services group from the police. So the crime scene investigators couldn't access the area either.
And do I take it they wanted to access the area to undertake their investigation as to the likely cause of this ignition?
Correct.
But that was simply impracticable?
Yes.
Your Honour, that concludes my examination of Detective Inspector Clements.
Thank you, Mr. Castleman. Mr. Newton, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Your Honour.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Detective.
Your Honour, the next witness is Senior Constable Thomas Dodd, who I understand is in the virtual waiting room. Could Senior Constable Dodd be brought into the virtual courtroom and called, please?
Senior Constable Dodd, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Your Honour.
Right, you'll just hear from the court officer now.
Thank you.
Please. You solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you, Senior Constable.
Detective, would you please state your full name, rank and the station that you're presently attached to?
Detective Senior Constable Thomas Dodd, DODD, currently attached to Camden Police Area Command Detectives.
Detective, have you prepared two statements in relation to the Greenwater Creek fire, the first dated the 3rd of April 2021 and the second dated the 5th of April 2022?
I have.
And do you have copies of those statements with you this morning?
I do.
Are there any corrections you wish to make in relation to any of those statements?
I believe in the first statement, there was an error in the date by 1 day in relation to some images that were obtained by National Parks and Wildlife Service. I believe it's paragraph 7 of my initial statement. Yes.
And should the reference in the first sentence, which is the second line of paragraph 7, read 27 November, not 26 November?
Correct.
In 2021, were you seconded from the Fairfield Detective's Office to the State Crime Command Financial Crime Squad?
That's correct.
And had that squad, that is the State Crime Command Financial Crime Squad, formed a strike force known as Strike Force Toronto to provide support and to review the unfolding bushfire crisis over that bushfire season 2019-2020?
That's correct.
And when you were seconded to that squad, what was the purpose of your secondment?
So the purpose of my particular secondment was as part of a larger group. During the bushfire crisis, there were a large number of major bushfires across the state. The group was formed, I suppose, to ensure consistency across all investigations being prepared for the coroner, and also to provide direct assistance and advice and guidance to local police who are conducting their investigations.
And as part of that process, were you allocated the Greenwater Creek fire?
That's correct, I was.
And in relation to that specific fire, what steps did you undertake in relation to your review of the Greenwater Creek fire?
So in conducting my review under Strike Force Toronto, we were provided remote access to the RFS systems, and we were able to review fire progression maps and other information that was obtained in their system. In doing that, I reviewed lightning strike data, effectively to assist Detective Sergeant Clements at the time, now Detective Inspector, in identifying the cause and origin.
And did you reach a point of view as to the likely cause and origin of this particular fire?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
Overwhelmingly, evidence suggested lightning as the cause.
And I'll just have displayed, if I may, Your Honour, from Detective Senior Constable's first statement, a line scan, and I'll just have that displayed. It appears at page 4, Detective, of your first statement.
Yes.
Towards. If you don't have it with you, Detective, it's on the screen now, and hopefully you can see it on your monitor.
Yes, I can.
Could you just explain to Her Honour what this line scan discloses and what you did in relation to the information that one sees recorded on it?
Okay, so in the top left of the screen there, you can see the time the line scan was taken. It's this is a line scan that I obtained from the RFS system, taken at 12:18 a.m. on the 27th. Shows the area of origin of the fire, cross-referencing some lightning strike information, or the lightning strike information that was provided. We're able to determine by GPS coordinates 3 individual strikes, which almost perfectly matched up to the identified hotspots of that line scan when the fire was quite infant.
Now, pausing there, if we may, we see, as you've identified, in effect, 3 hotspots. If we just start with the one furthest to the west or to the left of the image,
Yes.
Did you come to learn that that was an area known as Butcher's Creek?
Yes.
And I take it that the line scan and the lightning strike data that you had access to generally married up to what we see in that area around Butchers Creek.
That is correct.
Moving to the east or to the right of the image, one sees, in effect, two other hotspots. Is that the general area of what's known as Greenwater Creek?
Yes, the creek itself runs sort of from the lower left of page to the upper right. You can see a creek line weaving along. That is the Greenwater Creek.
And again, having regard to this line scan and lightning strike data that you obtained, that the lightning strike data generally marries up with the presence of the hotspot that one sees on the line scan image.
That is correct.
Now, if we move to your second statement and to the images that are next to that, and I'll just have those displayed. They appear, Your Honour, from page 68-5 and following. I just might have you, Detective, explain the significance of each of the images that appear as part of your attachment to your second statement. You'll see the first one.
Yes.
Just put that back up on the screen if we could. We've lost that. And if that could be slightly magnified for the benefit of Her Honour. Now, what was the purpose of creating this image or attaching this image to your second statement?
It's not appearing clear on my screen. Is this the image 68-5?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay. So this says Annexure A1 overlay. Effectively, this relates to the dropped pin or the flag marker there.
Yes.
If I can take you to the next page, 68-6, you'll see it's an aerial photograph of National Parks and Wildlife aircraft.
Yes.
Now, in the upper centre of that image, you'll see some GPS coordinates.
Yes.
Excuse me, one moment.
And that's referring to 34 degrees.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologise. 68-4 is the photo that relates to 68-5.
Thank you. The
Yes,
first
so-
aerial photograph.
Correct. So this photograph effectively has the GPS coordinates in what's called DDM format. Once converted into DD format, gives you the converted reference of -34.02628, which is overlaid on 68.5. Now, the dropped pin on 68.5 is the location of the aircraft at the time of that image. And if you need to see in the top left of that image that is on screen now, it says that the camera is facing in a generally southwest direction.
Yes, and we see that in the top left-hand corner of the...
Looking at 68.5, if you were to draw a line in a generally southwesterly direction from that dropped pin, which is the helicopter's location at the time, so down to the left, you'll notice quite a distinct 90-degree angled ridge, which is effectively the exact same location as those hotspots on the previous line scan that we looked at. This also shows the fire in its infancy in that same location.
Thank you. And did you do that same task in relation to other aerial photographs taken by National Parks and Wildlife of that general area of origin on the 27th of November 2019?
That's correct. There were 5 images. There's Annexure A1 relates to Annexure A1 overlay, and then using that same methodology as I just explained, relates to Annexure A2, A3, A4 and A5.
Now, in terms of the lightning strikes, are you able to say how many lightning strikes were recorded in that period of time just prior to when smoke was sighted in that area around Greenwater Creek on the 27th of November 2019?
The lightning strike data that I had ranged a 48-hour period from the 25th to the 27th and took into account all of New South Wales, and that was in excess of 82,000 lightning strikes. I don't have the exact number in front of me that relates to the specific area around the point of origin, but I would say it was in excess of 500 strikes.
And as part of your analysis and review, were you able to filter those lightning strikes out to identify and pinpoint a more specific area of origin in relation to the ignition of this fire?
That's correct. I took a line of latitude from the northern edge of the Kingarra Boyd National Park and the southern edge, and removed and filtered out any lightning strike beyond those parameters. I did the same east and west, which left me with a much smaller list of strikes. Each of those strikes had recorded GPS coordinates, longitude and latitude, which I then overlaid with those aerial images and line scans.
Detective, did you do an aerial inspection of the general area of origin or not?
I did not.
From your review of aerial imagery and satellite photographs, how would you describe that general area of origin where it's believed this fire originated from?
I would say borderline inaccessible, definitely inaccessible for road vehicles, borderline inaccessible trekking, unless following the river. I can see that looking at the suspected area of origin is some 4.5 to 5 kilometres from the nearest fire trail, and there are no listed campsites or anything in that area.
In terms of the opinion that you reached, are you comfortably satisfied that the most likely cause of this ignition was lightning strike and not some other?
Yes, I am.
That concludes my examination of the detective.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton. Mr. Newton, do you have any questions?
Your Honour, I have no questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Senior Constable. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour.
All right, I note the time, and the next witness we'll need to bring in locally through the ABL system. Is it a convenient time to take the morning adjourn?
Yes, it is. We'll adjourn now and resume at 12.
Please, the court.
Silence. Court now resumes.
Yes, Mr Castleton.
Your Honour, before I call the next witness, Mr Sweeney, could I formally tender the 2-volume Central Metro General Brief of Evidence?
Yes.
I understand that ought to be marked Exhibit 51A.
Yes, that's right, 51A. Thank you, Mr Castleton.
No, please, Your Honour. The next witness is Andrew Sweeney, who I understand is joining virtually. I call Mr Sweeney, Your Honour.
Mr Sweeney, can you see and hear us?
I can, yes, Your Honour.
We'll just hear from the court officer now.
Silence, please. Do you solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Sir, would you please state your full name and rank and position within the New South Wales Rural Fire Service?
Yes, my name is Andrew Graham Sweeney. I am currently a group officer within the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and an authorised wildfire investigator.
And have you prepared a fire investigation report into the cause and origin of a fire that's been named the Greenwater Creek Fire?
I have, yes.
And do you have a copy of that fire investigation report with you this afternoon, Mr Sweeney?
I do, yes.
And have you also provided a statement dated the 11th of April 2022 in relation to some of the steps you took as part of your investigation into the Greenwater Creek Fire?
That is correct.
And do you have a copy of that statement with you this afternoon?
Yes, I do.
Can I ask you this at the outset, Mr Sweeney, if you could just identify in broad terms or by way of summary your education, qualifications, training and experience in relation to the investigation of wildfire or bushfire?
Yes, I first conducted the wildfire investigation course 7 years ago. In that time, I've conducted around 10 investigations and conducted numerous training courses and information sessions with the Wildfire Investigations Forums and with Fire Rescue New South Wales.
Thank you. Now, if I can take you firstly to your fire investigation report, I just wanted to identify what appears to be an error and tell me if you agree, but the second paragraph on the first page of that report, you say this: the fire had burnt a total of 1,278,199.94 hectares. Do I understand that is an error? I think we've lost Mr Sweeney, Your Honour.
I can still hear you and see you.
Right. We lost sound and vision froze for a moment. Was that an error in terms of the area that the fire burnt?
That is an error, yes, that's correct.
And should it read not 1 million but 278,199 hectares?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, in terms of how you came to be tasked with this fire investigation, how did it come to you to carry out a cause and origin investigation for the Greenwater Creek Fire?
I had a phone call from one of our coordinators, Cheryl Cook, and she asked if I was available to investigate this fire, in which I was, and I agreed to.
And what steps did you take to investigate the likely cause and origin of the Greenwater Creek Fire, Mr Sweeney?
I firstly proceeded to the Picton Fire Control Centre and liaised with all the staff that were on site at the time. And upon arriving there, I gathered information that they had on the fire in the form of the maps, the lightning data, and then the next day I had organised a helicopter flight over the area of concern for the grid references that I was given of the first smoke sightings for the fire.
As part of that initial review of the material that was held within New South Wales Rural Fire Service, did you have access to aerial photographs taken by New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service on the morning of the 27th of November 2019?
No, I didn't.
In terms of grid references, what information did you have that enabled you to identify a likely area of origin in relation to this ignition?
It was the grid references that were given by both National Parks and Rural Fire Service at the Fire Control Centre at Picton.
And you mentioned a moment ago that you undertook an aerial inspection of the likely area of origin, correct?
That is correct.
Was it an area that could be accessed on foot or by vehicle or not?
No, it was very, very inaccessible and very thick shrub area.
And I'll just bring up now some photographs and maps which are annexed to your statement, Mr. Sweeney. And maybe if we go to the last page of your statement, which is page 64-21 of the brief of evidence, Your Honour. Take a moment, Mr. Sweeney, to either locate that document in your papers, or if you look at your monitor, you may see it on the screen now. But does that...
I've got it in front of me, yes.
Does that describe the path of travel that you took in the helicopter when you undertook your aerial inspection?
Yes, that does. That's correct.
And did you fly in a clockwise direction?
I did, yes.
And did you depart near to Mittagong?
That is correct, yes.
Now, as one moves from Mittagong in a northwest direction, one comes to a circle with a red cross in it. What does that depict?
Which red cross were you referring to, sorry?
The first one that one encounters as one tracks northwest from Mittagong heading towards the general area of origin.
Yes, that's the first one with the grid reference 483286. That is the first reference that we got.
Not that one, the one immediately below that.
Oh, sorry, that's I referenced that as we were tracking back, we saw further trees that had been affected by lightning, and I just marked that as a reference just to show that there was numerous trees that were affected in the area by lightning.
If one then moves from that first red cross and circle in a clockwise direction, before one gets to the grid reference you've identified, there's another circle with a red cross within it. What does that depict?
That would be the area of where the Butchers Creek fire first sightings were given.
Thank you. And then we come to a further red cross within a circle where a handwritten annotation reads 483286. Now, what's the significance of that?
And that is the grid reference that I was given for the Greenwater Creek fire.
And one sees a body of water to the east or to the right of that grid reference. Is that, to your understanding, Lake Burgarang?
That is correct.
Now, I understand that you took a number of photographs as you passed over the general area of origin, and we see those commencing, Your Honour, page 64-14. And if it assists you, Mr. Sweeney, it's an extra C to your statement. Now, what's contained within the red circle of this photograph?
That is a lightning affected tree.
Now, it's not the greatest quality photograph, and I don't mean that by way of criticism, but what were some of the telltale features or attributes which led you to the conclusion that it was a lightning struck tree?
The top canopy in the macro area of the tree, you could clearly distinguish that the top canopy, top side of the tree had been broken off and was trailing down into the bottom area of the tree, specifically for the indicators of a lightning strike.
Thank you. And if we then move to the next photograph, which is photograph 64-15, is that the same lightning struck tree as we saw a moment ago, or is it a different one?
Now that's the same tree with a different angle.
And then just pausing there, and if you can read the caption quietly to yourself, do you see references made to grid reference 484286?
That's correct.
Do I take it that when you've written 483286 on annexure or attachment D to your second statement, that is in error and it should read 484286?
That is correct.
For the abundance of caution, do I understand your evidence that the grid reference for the lightning struck tree is 484286?
That's correct.
Thank you. And then if we then move into attachment 64-17, sorry, 16 and then 17, are they also photographs of the same lightning struck tree at that same grid reference 484286?
That is correct.
And then, Mr. Sweeney, at page 64-18, there's a further photograph of lightning affected tree at the area of origin. Is that a different tree that you observed?
That is correct, yes.
And you formed the view from your aerial inspection that it was a tree that had likely been struck by lightning?
That is correct.
And then moving to the next photograph at 64-19, is that the same tree but from a different angle?
That is correct, yes.
And then finally it's 64-20. You've referenced a photograph in these terms, photograph showing another lightning affected tree at grid reference 484286. How many lightning struck trees did you see in that general vicinity of grid reference 484286?
It was the two. So the 6419 and 6420 are the same tree.
Thank you. And just to correct one aspect of your statement, if I may, Mr. Sweeney, paragraph 11 of your statement, which was completed earlier this year, page 2, paragraph 11, references made to grid reference 483286. Should Her Honour read that as 484286?
That is correct.
Now, in terms of your ultimate conclusion as to what was the cause or likely cause of the Greenwater Creek fire, what conclusion did you reach?
That the fire started from lightning strikes within the area.
And how were you able to exclude other possible causes to arrive at the conclusion that it was likely to be lightning?
Firstly, the location of the fires was very inaccessible. Even though from air you couldn't clearly define camping sites or camping areas, there was no trails that would lead to that location, being very inaccessible. No power lines through the immediate area, and no rail lines, and no equipment use, as there was no fire trails or sealed or bituminous roads within the area at all.
And do I take it you were comfortably satisfied that it was more probably than not an ignition caused by a lightning strike?
That is correct, yes.
And to fortify that conclusion, did you have access to lightning strike data?
I did, yes.
And did the lightning strike data in general terms marry up with the grid reference where you had identified those 2 lightning struck trees?
Yes, that is correct.
Your Honour, that concludes my examination of Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Newton, do you have any questions for Mr. Sweeney?
No questions, Your Honour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sweeney. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Your Honour, that concludes the evidence in relation to the Greenwater Creek Lake Burgarang fire inquiry. Your Honour now has the benefit of the documentary material contained within the brief of evidence tendered as Exhibit 52A, as well as the oral testimony of Detective Inspector Daniel Clements, Detective Senior Constable Thomas Dodd, and Andrew Sweeney, New South Wales Rural Fire Service fire investigator. At a later stage in Your Honour's inquiry into the 2019-2020 bushfire season, those assisting Your Honour will formally address Your Honour on the cause and origin of the Greenwater Creek Lake Burgarang fire. In that regard, I can foreshadow now, for the benefit of my learned friend, that a formal submission is likely to be made that the fire commenced as a result of lightning strikes in remote bushland of the Blue Mountains National Park and some 15 kilometres southwest of Warragamba Dam, sometime in the 48 hours prior to the sighting of the fire on the morning of 27 November 2019. As Your Honour has just heard, it is believed that 2 trees were impacted by lightning strikes at the location of grid reference 484286. Your Honour, that concludes that matter. Would Your Honour formally stand the Greenwater Creek Lake Burgarang fire inquiry over to the 5th of September 2022?
Yes, I do that now.
May it please the Court.
Thank you. Unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn today and resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
May it please the Court.